Hi, my name is Tricia Kerr, and I'm the ESOL Program Director and Title III Co-Coordinator with the Arkansas Department of Education's Division of Elementary and Secondary Education. Today, we are going over the 2020-21 Language Minority Student English Learner Data Entry Requirements. Our goal today is to inform districts regarding DESE's expectations regarding data reporting related to language minority students and English learners for the 2020-2021 school year. And as always, our intent is to always comply with promoting efficiency of data collection in Arkansas. The first thing that we need to ensure you are submitting to DESE is your ESOL coordinator contact information. All districts, every single district, whether you have a language minority student or not, must have an ESOL coordinator, and the contact information for that person should be entered in eFinance for every cycle that we pull reports. The contact information that should be included includes the person's name, email, phone number, fax number, and cell number. For the districts that qualify for a Title III federal grant, you should also designate a Title III federal grant coordinator and enter their contact information in eFinance. You may see the contact persons section on pages 33 to 35 of the SIS manual for further information. And please update this information anytime there is a change, regardless of when the change occurs during the school year. These are cycle reports that contain English learner information. As you can see, like I said, the contact person's report is pulled every single cycle. The federal program's private school report is pulled during cycle 6, and that information is shared with Title III districts at a later date. Then we have two reports that are pulled regularly. One is the district student EL information, and one is the school student EL information. That is pulled cycles 2 through 7 and contains a variety of information about your English learners that we use for a variety of purposes. We also pull an overall district home language and school home language report during cycle 2. We use this data along with other data from cycle reports concerning dropouts, retention, school age students, etc., for federal reporting requirements regarding English learners in Arkansas. Regarding foreign exchange students, I'll let you know right up front that you are to treat these students as you would any other student concerning screening, identifying, and serving for English learner services. Just as any other student, they must complete a home language usage survey and screen them if anything other than English. Then you would place them in ESOL services if qualified. Parents and guardians have a right to decline services, as do all other parents. You may reference the Serving Foreign Exchange Students link in the presentation and on the English Learner website, as well as Commissioner's memo that is referenced below. On the English Learner webpage with DESE, we have the Arkansas English Learner Entrance and Exit Procedures. These are required from ESSA. As a state, we had to develop these along with the procedures on how to identify English learners and how to exit them from English learner services. This was developed in collaboration with a stakeholder feedback group and has been submitted and approved by the U.S. Department of Education. On the English Learner webpage, you will find the items listed here. The English Learner Entrance and Exit Procedures Entry and Exit Manual outlines everything you would need to know about how to process students to determine if they are an English learner or a former English learner and how to monitor them. There is a whole webinar on this process that is linked on the DESE website, and I would encourage you to review that as you are making the processes work for your district on how you will identify your students. There's also a handout on the Arkansas Professional Judgment Rubric Exit Criteria. These are the 2 data points that a student must have in addition to scoring proficient on ELPA 21 in order to be classified as a former English learner. There is a video webinar of how to implement that rubric on the website as well. And then there's just a reminder that the Arkansas Home Language Usage Survey is required for all new students to Arkansas whenever they enroll in an Arkansas school. The Home Language Survey has been updated. We now have it in 10 languages in addition to English, and you can find them on the DESE English Learner webpage. In addition to that, we have the Home Language Usage Survey Verification Form and the Language Minority Student Exit Monitoring Form. All districts must use these forms for the purpose for which they're intended. They may use an electronic version of them, but the electronic versions must contain all the elements present in the ones posted. These forms are required to have, districts are required to have a version of them by the ESSA entrance and exit procedures that we developed. However, the forms we provide in this section are simply sample forms. You may edit them as needed as long as the elements that are in there are addressed in your letters that you actually use. If you ever want a letter reviewed for your district, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'd be glad to do so. We have letters here for a variety of purposes. Currently, they're in 5 languages, and within the next week, there should be 5 additional languages posted. In addition to finding them on the DESE website, you may also find them in Transact. Transact is a free translation service database that we have in Arkansas, and I would encourage you to find more information about that on the English Learner webpage. Just as a brief reminder about the Arkansas entrance and exit procedures, the entrance procedures state that all Arkansas students who may be English learners will be assessed, placed, and parents notified of that placement within the first 30 days of enrollment at the beginning of the school year, or within 2 weeks of enrollment thereafter. This timeline is still in place for the 2020-21 school year. Please pay attention to the English Learner Listserv and the Commissioner memo should this be changed in light of the COVID-19 situation. The exit procedures also continue to be the same. LEAs have to annually review every identified English learner's progress in acquiring English. This should be conducted by your site-based Language Proficiency and Assessment Committee. The annual review should include a committee analysis of the ALPA 21 summative assessment scores and other available student performance data. Exit decisions must be made by and documented in eSchool no later than September 30th of each school year. As a reminder, see the entrance and exit procedure manual with accompanying webinar posted on the English Learners webpage. Regarding identifying your language minority student and English learners, all districts must have a process for identifying these students. The first step is always to administer a home language usage survey to all students upon their initial enrollment in your school district. Then you screen those who answer anything other than English on the home language usage survey or with their verification form with the ALPA 21 screener, or you can use a summative test from a prior district. And you should have a process within your district to process the student's home language usage survey. That should include notifying your ESOL coordinator of any student with an answer other than English, ensuring that a copy is filed in the student's cumulative folder for all students regardless of their answer. And if any language other than English is indicated, you enter that language in the eSchool home language field on the student summary page under registration. Otherwise, you enter English in the eSchool home language field. It's very important that if any language is there, that you put that as the student's home language. If a guardian indicates preference for communication in a language other than English, which is question 1 on the home language usage survey, then enter that chosen language in eSchool under the guardian contact information under the general information tab. A tip is to resurvey periodically parents for what language they prefer written and oral communication in, as those needs may change over time. Some caveats to consider for determining if a student's language minority students. If at any time you're doubting whether a student is truly a language minority student, it's recommended to conduct a parent interview. Sometimes you get false positives if they're not truly a language minority student. In those cases, you will file a completed home language usage survey verification form indicating why the other language was indicated on the home language usage survey with the student's home language usage survey. And for those students, you would enter English, or EN, as the home language in eSchool. Now, sometimes you'll get a false negative. That's if, for example, all the answers on the home language usage survey were English, but you also have evidence of a language other than English being used by the student and/or family. In those cases, you file a completed home language usage survey verification form indicating the evidence of the language other than English present to a significant extent and specify that language with the student's home language usage survey. Then you enter the other language as the student's home language in eSchool. Here are some examples. Dora the Explorer reason for putting Spanish on the home language usage survey. Now, sometimes parents will put that their child's learning another language and you inquire about it. It's only one, maybe one of the responses, and they say, well, yes, we're trying to make sure they're exposed to a variety of languages. And so we watch Dora the Explorer and they're learning, some basic greetings. And I even have them doing Duolingo on the phone. And I'm glad they're learning another language. Well, that is great, but that is an additional language, not one of their first languages. And that is not a language minority student and would be a false positive. One example I've seen is the home language usage survey indicated French was spoken in the home. Upon visiting with the child and family, it's discovered that French was listed because the family is learning French in order to visit France in the future. This would not be a language minority student and is a false positive. Another example of a false positive would be a 5th grade student who was in an English-only home until 2 years ago when dad remarried and stepmom, now that is with the family, speaks Spanish fluently. This is a language added later in life, and the student would not be a language minority student. Now, the next situation is one that maybe an English-only family, they adopted a child. This situation says a Marshallese child, but he grew up in the Marshallese-speaking home until age 4 and then was adopted by the English-only family. This child would be a language minority student because one of his first languages up until age 4 was Marshallese, and this student would need to be screened. This is a kindergarten student who comes from a home where Spanish is spoken by the parents. The student is very limited in any language due to a possible disability, and it's hard to test them for any language proficiency. This would still be considered a language minority student, and you would still need to attempt to screen them for English proficiency. A home language usage survey is all English, and the family needs an interpreter. Upon visiting with the family, it is determined that the student has lived with them since birth. Then in this situation, this is a language minority student, would be a false negative, and you would need to screen them. Another example, the home language usage survey is all English. The parent and student converse in a language other than English. Upon visiting with the parent and student, it is determined they have known this other language for years. Then this would be a language minority student, and you would go ahead and screen. Another example, the current home language usage survey is all English, but paperwork from a prior district indicates a language other than English was on their home language usage survey, and or the student was identified as an English learner. Upon visiting with the family, it is determined they now prefer English, but did use the other language more in the past. This is still a language minority student and would need to be screened. You would need to make sure the language appropriately reflects the additional language you have discovered. So here's a visual summary of how we identify a language minority student in eSchool. The home language usage survey is completed. If all English, you put English. If any answer other than English, you may have verified this, is present, then they are a language minority student. and you enter their other language as the home language. In an eSchool, you will check the ESL box on the educational factors screen. All this means at this point, or ever, is that this is a student that is considered a language minority student, and the ESL department must screen them. It does not indicate they are an ESL student. So here is where you would enter the home language. That is any language other than English on the student's home language usage survey or verification form must be listed. Otherwise, this defaults to English. Here you can see where you can enter the guardian contact information. You ask the family and indicate their preferred language. Then check the box, use language for mailing if it's not English and they wish to have the information in another language. Another thing you may do with the language information, the home language is always required in eSchool. The language of correspondence, while it's not required by us as a state, it is suggested so that you can run reports in Cognos to show what language of communication your families prefer and need so that your school staff can adequately communicate with them. Once you have this entered into eSchool, a report can be generated in Cognos. The name of the report is listed here, the AppScan ESL class rosters with language of correspondence. It can be found by following the path designated on the screen. When you get to that report, you can then get a printout by teacher of what language needs to be used to communicate with the parents. And then the final step for a language minority student is checking this ESL box, making sure it says yes if their home language usage survey or verification form has any language other than English indicated. All students with ESL checked are considered language minority students for state and federal reporting purposes. In order to identify whether or not they are an English learner, you must have an approved screener or placement test result for them. In Arkansas, this is only the ELPA 21. The ELPA 21 screener for any student who has not been tested with ELPA 21 yet will be available beginning August 4th. The ELPA 21 live binder for the 2020-21 school year is available. It is linked in the presentation and also available on the DESE ELPA 21 webpage. Also linked here are some guidelines for re-entry to on-site summer programs and activities. This lists the Arkansas Department of Health guidelines that are required to do one-on-one assessments, which is what ELPA 21 screener is, even beginning this summer. Please follow all Arkansas Department of Health guidelines regarding mask or distance between the teacher and the student, and distance between students, and sanitation of equipment and devices. The district should use current ELPA 21 summative scores if they are available on transfer students. So in other words, if Pocahontas gets a student that transfers from Hot Springs and the student took the spring 2020 ELPA 21 test in Hot Springs, then they would utilize the spring 2020 ELPA 21 summative score for that student. If the student does not have a spring 2020 ELPA 21 summative score, then you would go ahead and screen them with the ELPA 21 screener. Once you have identified which students are an English learner based on the English learner entrance and exit criteria, please refer to that training if needed, then you will indicate on the ELL entry and exit screen whether they are an English learner or not. You can see there where it says not assigned. If it says not assigned, that means they are not a current English learner. Either they never were an English learner, or they have an entry and exit date on the EL program screen and they are a former English learner. If this field says yes, then they are a current English learner. They only have an entry date and the value box checked on the ELL program screen. Once you go into the EL program screen, you'll see these fields. The start date is the date the student entered a U.S. school for the first time in grades kindergarten through 12th. Do not count pre-K, but count their first day in a U.S. school, regardless if the entry was in Arkansas or another state or D.C. Do not count Puerto Rico schools as entry into a U.S. school. For this screen and these purposes, that is not considered a U.S. school. So you enter their start date as the first day they attended any U.S. school in K through 12. And then if they are the English learner, you check that value box if they're an English learner. If they are not an English learner and they are a former English learner, you indicate the end date. This is the date after the student meets state criteria for former English learner status and is no longer eligible to participate in the ESOL program and services. Please note, the EL program screen is not closed out unless the student has met the state exit criteria and tested out of the program. This applies even when withdrawing the student. So do not put an end date when the student withdraws from the school. Leave all English learner data as is at the point of withdrawal from school. And just a reminder, that value box needs to be checked if they are an English learner. If all you put is a start date and you don't check the value box like that, they will not count as an English learner. So that may show up as an error on your error report. For all English learners, current English learners, you need to go into this part on the EL field screen to indicate there are two LIEP or Language Instruction Education Program. There's two program types. The first one is their English Language Development or ELD program type. Here you indicate the primary type of ELD service being provided to that English learner. You can see the codes listed here, and the line at the bottom of this screen is a link to a document that explains what those codes mean. But you'll either pick push in, pull out, embedded, a class period, a newcomer program, or that they have declined ELD services. You also must indicate what LIEP core content access they are being provided. This is the primary method by which the school provides meaningful access to the full curriculum. You must pick either sheltered instruction, content classes with integrated support, a newcomer program, or that the parent has declined access to this aspect of your ESOL services. Other evidence-based research service models can be used as determined effective at district discretion. However, you must use one of the codes in the list provided in this EL data collection process. This is a new field this year, recently arrived English learner. We used to calculate it based on the EL entry date, but that is not always accurate because we have some students who move back and forth between the United States and another country. This is to identify your recently arrived English learner students. The first criteria is they must be an English learner to qualify for this status. For your English learners, determine the cumulative number of months the student has attended a U.S. school as of May 3rd, 2021. This only includes the 50 U.S. states and D.C. So you calculate how many months they have attended school as of May 3rd, 2021, and you indicate whether they are a Rail 1 for the first 12 months, a Rail 2 for the second 12 months, or a Rail 3 for the third 12 months. This is cumulative time. So if a student came, for example, in May of 2015 and they were here for a month, and then they returned this year in January of 2021. So they were here in January, February, March, April. That's 4 months plus the month back in 2015. That is a total of 5 months. That student would be considered a Rail 1. The next thing you'll enter, if applicable, is whether the student has waived services, or actually if the student has waived services. If so, you will enter an ESL, ELL waive date. This is the date that the EL student's parents signed the form waiving ESL, ESOL services. Please keep in mind that English learners can have 4 possible service combinations. They're in your full ESOL program. They will have both an ELD and core content access program that both are being provided. They may be only in your ELD program, but they have declined the core content access services. Or they may only be receiving core content access services and the parents have declined ELD. Or they may have declined ELD and core content access. Regardless of the service combination, English learners must still participate in the Spring ELPA 21 summative until the student meets exit criteria. So in other words, a parent may waive services, but they may not waive identification. Once a student has met the state exit criteria, they are considered a former English learner. A state who meets that criteria is no longer eligible for ESOL services, and their academic progress must be monitored for the first 4 years that they are a former English learner. During this time, you must indicate that they are being monitored. This includes language minority students initially placed as exited from ESOL services and never an English learner. We don't know at what point they quit becoming an English learner, so we give them monitoring services the first 4 years that we know that they are a former English learner. You'll see there that you'll choose M1 for the first year they're monitored, M2, and so on. And then once they have completed all 4 years of monitoring successfully, you will enter MC for monitoring complete. So all former English learners must have one of these 5 codes entered. Please make sure you also remove all ELD program type and core content access for your monitored students. This will mainly affect monitored year 1, as they may have had code for this last year. A reminder of the exit criteria. In order to exit English learner status in Arkansas, the ELPA 21 proficiency profile score must be proficient. If they scored a proficient score on ELPA 21, then you also complete the professional judgment rubric, and that score should be proficient. See the Commissioner's memo listed, as well as the webinar on the English Learners webpage. In addition, in light of the spring 2020 school closure, we did an update on the exit criteria. We did a little meeting on May 13th, and there's a video and presentation linked here as well as provided on DESE's webpage. This will explain how to apply the exit criteria when you did not have ACT Aspire scores from spring 2020. If a district is a Title III district, and these are only districts who have enough English learners to qualify for that and have actually been granted money for a federal Title III grant. There's about 50 districts that qualify for this. If in doubt, please ask my office and we can verify that for you. If a district is a Title III district and the student is a language minority student, doesn't matter if they're an English learner or former English learner, then you will mark Y or check it in the Title III field on the SIS miscellaneous items page. Mark this for current English learner, language minority students, and monitored former English learners. So we're trying to get you to mark all kids who are language minority students who are in a Title III district. We have to report on those who are current English learners, those who are monitored former English learners, and what level of monitoring they're in. Now this next field is a field that may apply to students who are not English learners. So please make sure you have a process in place in your district to identify immigrant. A student who is an immigrant by this definition provided in the Title III section of ESSA is a student who is between the ages of 3 and 21 and they were not born in any state And in this part of ESSA, a state is defined as 50 U.S. states, DESE, and Puerto Rico. And they have not attended one or more schools in any one or more states for more than 3 full academic years. For determining whether they're a recent immigrant, notice I'm saying immigrant, then you do look and see, have they attended school in the U.S. states, DESE, and Puerto Rico? This is different than the recently arrived English learner status discussed previously. You will enter a Y or an N. Please note, not all English learners are immigrant, and not all immigrants are English learners. Here is the field where you would check if they meet the federal qualifications for an immigrant according to ESSA. Please note, we do not use the ELL years field in eSchool. You are free to use that as a district for district purposes, but at this time, we do not use that field. As I said before, immigrant status is not the English learner status. A recent immigrant may be an English learner, they may be a former English learner, and they may be an English-only student. So ESOL program staff will not be the only staff maintaining this data entry. Building staff responsible for eSchool data entry will have to maintain this data for English-only students. Districts need to determine exactly who will maintain this data based on district parameters. What works in one district may not work in another. A new field this year is the Arkansas Seal of Biliteracy. The Arkansas Seal of Biliteracy is a wonderful program that recognizes Arkansas high school students who have attained proficiency in 2 or more languages. DESE annually reports on the number of Arkansas students who have obtained the Seal of Biliteracy to the National Seal of Biliteracy. The data reported here is to indicate which students have obtained the Seal of Biliteracy, including the additional language or languages and date achieved. The data is entered once the seal is granted. The seal is granted by the Arkansas Seal of Biliteracy Committee via an application process. Districts are to enter the language or languages. We actually have some students who have earned this in 4 languages beyond English. So you enter the languages they've earned. In addition to English, don't enter English. Just enter the additional languages that the student is deemed proficient along with the date the seal was granted. You can get additional information about the Arkansas Seal of Biliteracy on the DESE website as well. So how do we use all this data to determine your English learner funds? Well, I'll tell you. For the 2020-21 school year, we base our number of English learners on those who have been identified by each school district. We determine this utilizing Cycle 2 data retrieved from eSchool. DESE, my office, will pull the AppScan Language Minority Student Error Report data on the first Saturday in October for all districts. If this is not, quote, clear for a district, there are errors on it on that first Saturday in October, then we will be requiring you to correct that data and submit a separate data report to DESE. My administrative assistant will reach out to you and will work with you on ensuring that you submit any necessary reports. It is very important that you have Cycle 2 data correct, and if you happen to have it correct and clean by that first Saturday in October, then you don't have to enter anything to us. If you're still using the time up until October 15th to clean that up, that is fine. We will just work with you to obtain the necessary clean language minority student error report in order to release your funds. New this year, you are now receiving $352 per identified English learner student in grades K through 12. We highly, highly recommend that you run your eSchool Cognos language minority student error report daily or weekly to ensure it is clear of errors. We know that some of you may start the year with lots of errors since you were not able to finish identifying any new English learners who may have moved into your district during the school closure period, and that you may have provisionally identified some students during that time and need to finish the identification process, as well as identifying any students who are new to your district this fall, and including kindergartners and other transfer students. So please make sure you work on this and get it clear of all errors. My office would be glad to assist you in that. So as a reminder, our English Language Learner Funds is based on Cycle 2. And what we're looking for is when the value box is checked next to the EL entry exit start date and there's an English learner start date, that student is registered as ELL equals Y. And the student is counted as an English learner for ELL categorical fund purposes and federal data reporting purposes. We use the Cognos report, Language Minority Student Error Report, to verify that all the data appears to be clean. It's critical to run this regularly. It must be clean on the first Saturday in October when DESE pulls our statewide report. Otherwise, we'll give you the opportunity to submit additional ESOL reports to my office to verify your data was cleaned up. How do you use these funds? We have, just as of July, have updated the special needs funding rules, and the current version is linked here as well as provided on the DESE English Learner page as well as the rules page. But the section that was about the EL funding approved expenditures continues to be the same as it was in prior years. I think the number might have changed, but the text here is exactly the same. So this is just a list of some items that would be eligible. You can use this to provide skilled instructional services, but you can't supplant your obligation to provide teachers for English learner students. So an example of that would be you have a 4th grade teacher who has an ESL endorsement. Just because she has an ESL endorsement doesn't mean that you'll pay part of her salary out of EL funds. Now, if you hire an additional teacher who's doing push-in or pull-out or co-teaching or something like that with your elementary school, then that additional teacher could be paid for from this. If you have high school classes that are designated for ESL students, if they're the same size as any other high school class and they have to have an English class, then that ESOL English class will be paid for by regular funds. But if you're having a smaller class size, the additional cost could be offset part of their salary with this fund. In addition, you can pay for funds for teacher training, consultants, workshops. You can provide release time for people to work on ELL program development. You can select and purchase language appropriate materials to use for your EL students. Notice this is for your EL students. You're not supposed to use this to provide otherwise provided materials such as textbooks for your classes. This is supplemental materials and enrichment. You can provide language and cultural skills training for different school-based health service providers, counseling service providers, community liaison staff to help meet those needs. You can provide for assessment activities, including the test administration, identification, placement, and review of your EL student progress, as well as evaluation activities to determine the effectiveness of your district's program. And then you can use these funds to implement supplemental instructional services for English learner students. We do have several tools on the English Learners website. There'll be an updated ESOL program guide on the website shortly. In addition, there will be this presentation and will be linked under the DESE English Learner Data Entry Presentation Materials. But we also have 3 other resources that you need to be aware of. The first one is the 2020-21 Back to School Checklist. So I'm going to show that to you. This checklist is kind of just something some people have preferred to be able to just visually check off. Have they done all the steps they need to identify all the things in eSchool that need to be done? Which is kind of taking what we just talked about and putting them down step by step. There's also screenshots of what exactly needs to be entered. So some people have found it handy to print this out and laminate it and have it by the computer for those who are entering the eSchool data for your English learner and language minority students. Because it just walks through what you need to check and where everything is located and how to decide what goes in the start date box, how to decide what goes in the end date box. And so this can help you know what to do in those various fields. We did add information about recently arrived English learners on here to help you. It's right there. Okay. Okay, another item on here that you can find are the Cognos reports information. These are reports that are available in Cognos to help you manage your eSchool data. You can see we have everything from an ESL language minority student list that will list all of your active students in one of these categories, and you'll see all the fields that it enters. Any description about a field will tell you who it includes, what information is on that report, and if you can prompt to specify a select building, or if you can prompt for a specific enrollment date and such, because some of these can be done by date, some by building. There's a variety of reports. If you think of a report that would assist you and help you manage your EL data or use it more efficiently, please reach out to me or my admin assistant, Brooke Pence, and we'll be glad to work with you on creating that report. One of the most critical reports is this AppScan Language Minority Student Error Report. This looks for 7 specific issues on active students. Notice active students. When your data is entered correctly, there should be no students on this report. If there are things reported, you will see what the potential error is. For instance, if the language equals English and you have EL program information, well, this is a problem. Because if the language is English, they shouldn't have any EL program. So either the language should be something other than English, so you change the language, or the student shouldn't have anything, any dates in the EL program. So this sheet right here will kind of give you a hint at what might be the error being flagged by that column. So please use this to help you monitor and keep track of and use your eSchool data. The final piece is this EL data entry flowchart. This is also something that some have chosen to just kind of print out as a quick cheat sheet type thing. You're looking at a student's information and it will show you, let me make that a little smaller. It will show you that for a language minority student, the ESL is checked on the personal screen. That means that they're a language minority student and have any language other than English. All those kids have an EL entry date, which is their first day in a U.S. school, grades K through 12. Then all kids who have this must have an entry date on the EL program screen, and you screen them. If they are an English learner, you go this way, and they must have the EL value box checked, an ELD program type, a core content access selected on the EL program screen. Some of them may be recently arrived English learners if they have less than 3 years in U.S. school. Okay, then you've got some kids, language minority students who were screened, and they'll go the other path to be a former English learner or an exited student. They are not an English learner anymore. For all of those students, they should have an ELL end date. The value box is not checked. There is no ELD program type and no core content access. All of these will then have either M1 through M4 if they're in their first 4 years in monitoring, corresponding to the year they're being monitored, or an MC if monitoring is complete. Note that any of these students may waive services, but should still have an entry date on the EL program screen. So hopefully that little flow chart can kind of serve as a reminder of all the data points you need to enter depending on what type of language minority students you're entering. I highly encourage anyone working with English learners in Arkansas to sign up for the DESE English Learners Listserv. This is designed for all educators working with these students in grades K through 12, and you're welcome if you're pre-K or higher ed wanting to know what's going on in K through 12. We use this to communicate regarding technical assistance, professional development, or different opportunities you might have because you're serving English learners. To enroll, you go to this address. You will get an email that says, please confirm that you really meant to subscribe to this listserv, and then you will begin receiving messages. If you think you have signed up for the listserv but aren't receiving messages, please reach out to me and I'll assure that you get access to it, or we'll work with you and walk you through how to subscribe. Once you're a member, you may submit a message to this. We do monitor all messages, and sometimes we'll have messages submitted that we'll just answer you privately, and sometimes we'll answer for the good of the group. We have a whole team here to serve you at DESE. In addition to being the ESOL program director, I'm the Title III co-coordinator. Along with me as the Title III co-coordinator, you have Dr. Alan Lytle. He also is the EL assessment specialist to help you with all things ELPA 21 and related to EL assessment. And my EL admin assistant is now Brooke Pence. She's doing a great job and is looking forward to helping you with all things related to eSchool or to answering basic questions you have about the data entry process or just the basic entry and exit criteria. Then we have a whole team now of 5 English learner specialists. These are regional specialists who are housed across the state. You can see that Jana Catlett, she's housed at Dawson and is primarily responsible for supporting districts in Dawson, the Queen Mena, Southwest, and South Central. Lisa Coates is at the Northwest Co-op. But for Northwest, OUR and Guy Finter. Abby Ebarb is housed at the Southeast Specialist to serve that co-op in Arkansas Rivers and Great Rivers. Tracy Leone is housed at the Northeast Co-op to serve there, as well as North Central and Crowley's Ridge. And then Paula Vasquez is housed at the DESE building to serve Pulaski County, Archford, and Wilburby Mills. Our entire team is here to serve you. There's some pictures so you know what the regional EL specialist and myself look like. We are eager to help you as you are working with English learners this year. Don't hesitate to reach out should you need help with any of things discussed in this webinar or in providing professional development or anything related to English learners. We're here to help. Thank you.